All right. Looks like we are live.
Awesome. Yeah, I see the live indication. Nice to see you, Ron.
Yes. Nice to see you. I I just want to thank you first off for taking the time out of your schedule to join me on this little
Absolutely.
live conversation. To get people to know certain musicians a little bit better. I mean, some of the musicians that are well off the beaten path, that they're not yet household names,
Yep.
and I like to focus on people like that because everyone else knows about you know the the big people in music business, but
Yep.
I like to get people's attention to people such as yourself, that you know put out amazing music like the stuff that you sent me. um, Tiny orchestral moments. This one,
Oh, yeah.
and the electric gauchos, uh, number 6
Oh,
out of
yeah.
out of 9. Then this, the blue orb,
Oh, yeah. The first Electric Gauchos CD from the 1997.
and then this.
Ooh, C3.
I mean, this is an amazing. You know, see if people go look at it. This is amazing. The time and effort that's gone into this. You know not many people do that. And it's really nice when musicians put out that information. Kind of a look into what they're doing.
Yep. I've, for years, invested in making physical products, and even in the last 10 or 15 years, as everything has been moving toward digital and digital distribution, I still like the C3 book that you just held up. It's a book with a CD inside. I am still a big fan of making physical objects out of atoms that you can hold and touch and listen and essentially build a more visceral relationship with both the music, the musicians, and something that gives you a physical sense of how challenging it is to build this multi layered story just using notes and words and voices and instruments and then putting it in a little package. It used to be that this was hard to do, and bad news, it's still hard to do. And without a business model underneath most of this kind of work, I would say it's harder now than ever. But for me, that just means I'm putting even more time and emphasis on building and making. I'll just show you a couple crazy things, Ron. Not just one CD or a specific album, but I really am into making collections of music that essentially span collaborations. Like the Electric Gauchos CD 6 of 9 you mentioned is part of a box set that came out of a week-long improvisation that happened in Seattle about now 6 years ago. And I'm currently working on another, it's currently 13 CDs, Tiny Orchestral Moments project, that also has a 12-part video documentary series that director Luisa Mondes is completing. And that's been in the works for multiple years. And even my friend Brett Hamilton was asking, when is all of that happening? We're pretty close to completion, but I put a lot of time and energy and care into the physical packaging with embossing, and I'd like to make each object as if it were a painting, as if it
exactly.
were a unique object to hold and own and essentially keep in a collection as if it were a piece of art that you value over time.
Plus,
And
the one thing, like you were saying, physical paint. I like holding up the CD.
mm-hmm.
I'm more. I never really got into LPs.
Hmm.
My only only reason, well, actually, two reasons. One, I was afraid I was going to scrap,
Mm-hmm.
and two, I was afraid I was going to drop it or get smudge marks on it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to properly hold an album,
Mm-hmm.
so I was first of the cassette generation, um, and then when CDs came out, I was like going, yes,
Hmm.
this is what I've been looking for. This is the media that I wanted all along.
Yeah.
Um, and because A, the tape's not going to break,
Hmm.
and B, it's not going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know, and I've heard people in the have mentioned, CD rot, and
Hmm.
I've seen pictures of it, but I've never had one in my collection that has gotten to that point.
Hmm.
So it's like, and I do understand the now generation where it's all digital, um, that they may either don't have the space for a CD collection, or they're on the go
Yep.
and they want their media, whether it's on their tablet or their
Yeah.
phone,
Or on this. Yeah.
yes, they, and I like the both ideas because I like, whenever I get a CD, I put it in my computer and then I download it for my car onto a thumb drive,
Mm-hmm.
and I have that little USB port, put it in there, and I can listen to it because I can't see myself getting like a stack of CDs sitting on my car seat next to me or in a tray, and
Mm-hmm.
taking them out and put them in,
Yeah.
you know. I just like the idea for there, but
Yeah.
I do need to own the CD.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of buying um, digital.
Yeah.
The only time I get digital, honestly, is if I go through Amazon and I get, how if you buy a CD, certain CDs that give you that little MP3
Yep.
that you can play on their app.
Yeah.
That's really the only time.
Yep.
And I do explore on there, find stuff, especially if someone recommends.
Yeah.
Then I can go and sample it and see if it's something that I really want. So
Yeah.
if a friend gives me a recommendation, I just go over there or I go to YouTube and I search out and see, where it is.
Yeah.
If I and then listen to it, and then if I like it, um, like two of the biggest finds that I had last year, yeah, last year
Hmm.
was a band called Trillion and a band called Zon. Now, and these bands were like hard rock with a bit of progressive elements into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to say kind of on the lines of Styx, Saga, bands like that.
Okay.
They got
American
that.
bands.
No, I don't remember where Trillion is, but
Hmm.
Zon is from Canada,
Ah.
and I think from the Toronto area.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, I mean, and they were from like the late '70s, early '80s, and
Mm-hmm.
these are, and that's the wonderful thing is when you with Facebook is people get to talk about music that they own, and sometimes, well, for me, a lot of times, people say something, and I'm like going, I have never heard of these guys,
Yeah.
or I passed them up when they originally came out,
Yeah.
and I got to go back and get those that I should have had at the beginning, but for whatever reason,
Yeah.
I I've been through different phases in my life. Up until the early '80s, it was all on the radio. Whatever
Yeah.
was on the radio was what I listened to.
Yep.
I didn't care.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wasn't into music as I am now.
Hmm.
And over the years, I I have had what I call tunnel vision when it comes to music in the
Hmm.
past, where I would only listen to a certain genre, and
Yeah.
that's it, and
Over
nothing.
and over.
Yeah, and nothing else mattered about it.
Yeah.
Like in the mid '80s to early '90s, it was like thrash metal. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
and then in the early '90s, when I was working at a record store, a guy turned me on to a band that um, you worked with their guitarist, Robert Fripp. Turned
Oh
me
yeah.
on to King Crimson Red,
Oh geez.
and that
That's
was
a
my introduction.
That's a little rabbit hole that could take you down into a whole year or two of learning
Oh
and
yeah,
listening.
and I'm still going down that rabbit hole.
Same. It's pretty deep.
And and from then on, it just someone mentioned something, and pre-internet,
Mm-hmm.
you get catalogs in the mail,
Mm-hmm.
or you know then when the internet started, you had Yahoo groups where got found like-minded people to talk
Yep.
with, and then it just build and build until now we got Facebook, where people, the how do they say that old song, it's a small world.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
Well, I think your point about influential friends is so right on. And today, between Facebook, the internet, and all the various social networks, you can actually find influential networks. Like this is a sweatshirt from my friend Anthony Garone, who has a site and a service called Make Weird Music. And part of what Anthony is doing, a little bit like what you're doing, Ron, is he has, for the last few years, found, interviewed, and worked to promote the work of a network of artists that he finds compelling and energizing. And so he's in a similar kind of vein, working to help expose, kind of like one step at a time, this incredible network of intense music that's being made today, or that might also loop back to, I'll show you one sort of extended network. I fell into this album for about a year in the mid 80s. This is XTC. And if you actually
yes,
dive into any particular band, you can actually, and I've done this, I spend sometimes 6 months just listening and focused on one artist and really understanding the breadth and the depth of who they are in their catalog. And that can
exactly.
lead to, and you could actually look in the background and say, oh, Pat Mastelotto, the drums on the Mayor of Simpleton sound amazing. So then you can sort of branch out and find, holy crap, Pat Mastelotto was in Mr. Mister. Oh, and he plays on the Friends theme song, which has been on TV for 20 something years, 30 something years. And then you'll eventually find, oh, and he does about 500 side projects per year. And
Right.
he played with David Sylvian kind of on a whim, where he flew to England and auditioned uh, and got a job playing with Robert Fripp and David Sylvian. Oh, and then he joined King Crimson after that with
Right.
invitation. So the network effect of how musicians find each other and how fans who love music find music, it's largely who you know, and it's who slips you a little
Right.
disc and says, oh my god, listen to this.
Oh yeah. Like I got the rare copy.
Oh yeah. Oh geez. When do you remember when you got that, Ron?
I think you sent it to me about a few months to maybe a year ago.
Okay.
I did originally own it,
Mm-hmm.
the CD, um, and I noticed a lot of my stuff. I think I left back home, and I didn't realize it. And possibly at the time, my mother, I was living with her for a short while, and
Mm-hmm.
she may have accidentally thrown some stuff out.
Yep.
Um, so, and that's what I was saying is I go in and I'm trying to fill in the gaps of what I've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I first bought that, uh, oh, I think I got it back when it was originally released,
Mm-hmm.
1994,
Yep.
and it was at that time I was looking for bands that had a heavy element to it,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time they were experimental in their sounding, whether it was being complex or just doing things differently than what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
that.
especially with and then you go all the way, and then that last 25-minute um, kind of ambient thing, it was like I I mean I had never really gotten into that style of music
Mm,
before, and um, when I was working in a record store, the manager, he used to play all of that stuff,
mm,
everything from punk to classical and everything in between.
yeah.
And he was the one that turned me on to King Crimson, because
Mm,
he was getting very annoyed at me and one of my coworkers always playing Metallica, Megadeth, and
mm,
such. And he says, "Okay, you like the heavy? Okay, I got something for you." And then he put that in the player, and all of a sudden, I think that was my musical epiphany.
was it red? I
Everything
think you mentioned the
red.
first thing. Yeah. Okay.
It was red, and then
Yeah.
I mean, just that aggression, but then it was just done so. It wasn't, how do you say, angry aggression. It was
Mm,
just like concise
yeah.
aggression and from then, you know, I had to find out more about that band,
Mm,
and I
mm-hmm.
I bought the original EG uh, uh, label that they were on,
Yeah.
and I had to buy everything that they had, that the
Yeah.
record store had in stock. It
Yeah.
just and it was just all these different styles, and I guess you would call it chapters of that band. That
Yeah.
how they evolved from the beginning up until the recent incarnation. It's
Yeah.
like they were never the that's one of the very few bands that you can listen to it, any of their albums, and they won't be the same. you
Yeah.
know they
There's a
may have
paradox. It's almost a contradiction or a paradox in that if the intention is to evolve and grow and progress, which is in the root of the idea of this genre that music is progressive, which is now almost a dirty word, especially if you shorten it to prog. Um,
yes.
that some of my favorite artists over the years never repeat themselves, and I have the same bad habit if you look across the series of projects and collaborations, and part of that is an aesthetic choice, and part of that is a challenge to keep growing and keep going.
I find um for music two things. If the band continues just doing the same formula over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
I find that is both insulting to them, because obviously the record label is telling them, I want more of that hit single you put
Yeah.
out. I want a
Yep.
whole album of that.
Yep.
And then at the same time, it's insulting the audience.
Yep.
It's like, you know, you're going to put the same album out over and over again, different lyrics,
Yep.
and
Slightly. Yeah.
And it's like, I like my music to be challenging, even if I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I just like it where it's like all of a sudden, you're going down the road and all of a sudden there's a fork, and which way is the music going to go? You don't, and there's a lot of bands, King Crimson, yourself, that they don't go down where the obvious is. They
Yeah.
want you guys want to challenge the listener as well as challenging yourself.
Yeah. I would say it begins with challenging ourselves, and it's also a form of there's kind of a form of it's just like eating a meal. You don't just like plop down some french fries, like I love fries, and then you eat fries for the next 6 hours or 6 years.
Right.
And I think the variety that comes from experimenting with everything from genres, or the radical idea of sticking a 24-minute ambient soundscape on the end of a fairly heavy set of 9 songs, 8 songs, can also be a little bit like radical, jerk your head left and right. In fact, I would say one of the things we were doing when we were sequencing this was looking to find ways to wake up from whatever rut you got in from being in this 9-minute super prog, get heavy guitars, Allman Brothers-y, harmonies and crazy time signature changes, and then Pat Mestelotto like pounding away like a maniac underneath all this, and then all of a sudden there's this kind of quiet, almost simple pop song that sounds fairly happy, but then you listen to the words and it's like, oh, it's the story of an orphan child trying to figure out how to connect with his lost parents and his lost mother. So there's a whole like turn left, turn right kind of aesthetic that is sort of like, this is kind of a microcosm of that way of looking at shaking up and shocking expectations, kind of on a micro scale, and then maybe zooming out on sort of a more macro scale as well.
Yeah, that's for me. That's why I like the genre, because a majority of the bands do it that way. There are a few bands that either rest on their laurels or rest on a formula,
Mm-hmm.
and the formula works, and they keep on repeating the same album, and you can definitely hear, oh well, I hear that part from the previous 2 albums,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you can, and again, it's slightly insulting because it's like, you know, if you're gonna do that, why not just put out a live album,
Yeah.
and just do this, you're doing essentially the same thing over and over again. Just
Yeah.
put out a live album, of, any improvisational pieces that you have, bits and pieces that may have sounded like a previous album,
Yeah.
but not exactly,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Exactly. Well, there's a danger in that also, Ron. And this is, I've suffered from this a little bit over the years, but if you do, let's say, an all acoustic guitars and vocals album, but you had previously come from a world where everything you'd done was simply acoustic, complicated guitar ensemble work, people who aren't really into vocals may not like that you've turned left and abandon your roots, or shifted up how you think about what your musical values are. And so you can lose your audience really quickly if you turn left too radically.
right.
And that means it's harder both economically, it's harder to sustain interest. And I've seen this over the years, and even in my own taste. I have a set of friends who don't share my super wide taste in music. And a good drummer friend of mine at one point, when I first moved to Seattle in the 90s, we were talking while he was driving across a bridge, Aurora Bridge, for those who know Seattle. We were talking about bands we love. And, I turned and looked him in the eye and just said, I love Yes. I grew up with Yes. You know, the first real awakening I had, both as a listener and as a musician, was in seventh grade hearing Relayer and the Gates of Delirium opening up with these intense textures. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't tell what that music was. And maybe at 11 years old or something, it was just like opening up something that had been black and white before to color. And my friend,
Right.
my dear drummer friend, turned to me and said, I fucking hate Yes. And I realized in the moment, and it's still a lesson today, that music can be really polarizing as well. My love of Tori Amos or St. Vincent or Jonathan Brooke, or a whole set of rabbit holes I can go into. Jessica Hoop, for female singer songwriters who just do intense and intimate work, usually fairly intricate work. It appeals to me that ideally the singer songwriter also has a relationship with their instrument. So I love
Right.
intricate counterpoint and then vocals that feel completely independent from whatever the accompaniment is. But I have a set of friends who are like, oh, how do you listen to that stuff? So it can be really polarizing to shift genres and then leave a whole set of your audience behind.
Oh yeah. Speaking of getting into Yes, um, for me it was in the early '80s, and I got a cassette just on a whim. I just went and bought a classic Yes, that little compilation.
Oh yeah.
I bought that, and I didn't know that this was progressive rock. I just
Hmm.
thought that this was a just very different rock. It wasn't something that was like, okay, because I had heard, roundabout, and long distance run around, that they had on the radio. I heard what they were on the radio at the time,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, okay, I'll get this. This is like a good little intro. And then the other band that I got into at that around the same time was Queen,
Hmm.
Greatest Hits.
Yeah.
Again, a nice little intro into the band,
Yeah.
19, that was, I think, in 1981 when they put that out.
Hmm.
And then I had a friend of mine on my birthday in April of 1980. He gave me a cassette of Rush, Permanent Waves, and it
Hmm.
just had came out in January. And
Hmm.
he's giving me this thing, and it's like, I never heard of Rush before. Why are you giving me this? And
Yeah.
then when I listened to it, I was like, okay, I think he heard me playing some Yes stuff, you know,
Hmm.
because this was always the way that I listened to my music, because um, primarily due to hearing issues, I couldn't really play my music loud,
Hmm.
and I wasn't one of these guys that was going to come down with a boom box playing, roundabout. It's like I
Yeah.
would have, gotten the looks, because everybody at the time were, of the hard rock, heavy metal scene, in the early '80s. So it's like I always listen to my music on headphones.
Hmm.
That way I can loud as I want, and basically I can close my eyes and I can go into different worlds.
Hmm.
Because a lot of those bands like to do concepts of fantasy concepts. Whether it's like a Lord of the Rings or some sword and sorcery or some outer space thing.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I that was really like the beginnings of it, but I didn't know what this music was, so I didn't revisit that kind of music until Yes and Rush, until I got started going down the rabbit hole of King Crimson. It's
Hmm.
like going, oh, I remember these two bands. Let me go back and get into them.
Yeah.
And for me, and I know a lot of Yes fans have different favorite albums, but the two ones that honestly stick out to me the most
Hmm.
is Fragile
Hmm.
and Drama.
Oh, even
And
drama. Yeah, such an amazing left turn. No John
yeah,
Anderson and bringing the Buggles in as your replacement for Rick Wakeman and John Anderson. Incredible.
yeah, it was
And
like I couldn't believe how that sounded, and it was like those
mm,
two for me are like 2 points in their catalog where they did something very different. I know they, that double album that now, Tales from the Top of Graphic Ocean. I know
yeah,
that was different. That was different,
oh
but
yeah,
that was you. It takes a while for you to get into it.
yeah,
Whereas, an album like Fragile, it's shorter pieces,
yeah.
but it was like completely different for
Oh
me.
yeah. Well, Tales from Topographic Oceans also, I think, lost, yes, a lot of their more pop-oriented audience, where Roundabout and, kind of the first hits all of a sudden became four songs on four albums, each 23 minutes long. Oh, and it's built upon a semi-religious Eastern philosophy-driven set of lyrics that were already abstract and in the world of expressionism with non-literal meanings. And then there's long, extended thematic solos that are. It's more like a symphonic exploration, and the pop people are like, ah, that's too much. I think even Rick
Yeah,
Wakeman at the end was like, that's too much. I'm going to go do my own version of this with Six Wives or, his own longer explorations. But those turns that we take and decisions we make as musicians that involve genre changes or shaking up what used to work, that can be a difficult transition, even though maybe it's just the musician following their own muse or following what their own instincts are telling them they need to do. And I think most of the musicians who are able to do that usually have some grounding in a way to earn a living or enough of a safety net that they can do it without having to be desperate to, figure out how every 3 years to reinvent a career and build, a new fan base. And it's rough. It's pretty rough transition to be juggling multiple genres and multiple audiences as a musician. It's way easier. I saw a little interview with the Monkees on some YouTube channel, and Mickey Dolenz was saying, we're just going to play all of our hits, Daydream Believer and Clarksville. And I can't imagine for 30 something years, 40 years, playing the same song over and over.
right.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, it's the, but see, I understand that they're trying to get that little audience that always is stuck in that place in time
yeah,
where they only want to hear that the band at that moment in time,
yeah,
and anything before or after is, dare I say, irrelevant to them.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I only want to hear the hits. Like
yeah,
I had a friend of mine back in the cassette days. He would buy cassettes of the whole album, but he would only listen to the one or two hits on it,
yeah,
rewind, go back just to that, and
yeah,
go, why are you doing that? Why can't we listen? I want to hear the rest of this album, but you're only listening to those two songs that are on the radio. And it's like, why don't you just go, at the time we used to always record off of the radio. Why don't you just record those two songs, and that's it,
mm,
or if they came out with singles of those songs, you know, get those. It's like,
yeah,
to me, I've always, I think he was the one that basically set me in the way of, okay, the hits are nice, but all the deep cuts, they
yeah,
have, and I always think that while the hits may sell more,
yeah,
the other stuff um, challenges you more and has, you know, there's more to it.
yeah,
You know, it's not just, the basic, where rock and pop used 4/4, you know,
exactly. It's like a
or
full meal. And I'm the same way. In fact, I usually, eventually, almost can't hear the hit, or I'm not interested in hearing the hit again. I'm more interested in the context it was in that maybe generated, like in the case of this, Mayor of Simpleton, or there's a whole set of hits that have come from XTC over the years. But the interesting things that are going on are usually in the secondary tracks, or the tracks that someone just described as, oh, filler, throwaway. And I'm interested in albums that don't feel like they have any filler whatsoever.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but maybe
Eh,
if we could quickly, one of the things that I know you were interested in, Ron, maybe I could tell you just a little bit about the beginning of this project, Prometheus,
Oh
that
yeah.
was for me turning left after 7 years of working with Robert Fripp in the League of Crafty Guitarists and world tours from about 1986 through 1991. I dove in and I was essentially a full-time member of the League of Crafty Guitarists, and we did a whole set of world tours and album releases that some of you may have seen or heard about. Some of my friends are on, and we recorded almost every show as well. So we released a few live shows as well, and there started to be spin-off bands from the League of Crafty Guitarists around 1991, 1992, and I was doing a show with the League of Crafty Guitarists in 1989 at the Whiskey A Go Go. It was December 7th, 1989, and we had done this crazy countrywide tour called the BOGO Tour. We called it the BOGO Tour, and because it was kind of bogus, we booked our own shows, and we had two vans and just drove around the country living on fumes. And then we did this single show where Robert Fripp flew in and joined us on the 20th anniversary of King Crimson playing at the Whiskey A Go Go.
Oh
So
wow.
1969 to 1989, same day, December 7th. And we did this show, and at the show, there was a drummer there named Pat Mastellato. And there was also another, at that time, acquaintance who I'd met on a guitarcraft course a year earlier named Sanford Ponder. And Sanford was already a well-known, established artist. He was the first artist signed um, to the label by one of the guys who was in Tangerine Dream. And Sanford Ponder had two or three releases, one called Tigers Are Brave on Private Music was the label, along with Eddie Jobson and a whole set of kind of jazz fusion people. And
Right.
Sanford at the show came up and said, we need to do something together. And I think at that show, Pat will probably correct me later, but I think at that show somehow Pat Mastellato and I exchanged contact info. And it took a couple of years, but around 1991, Sanford and I got together and decided to put together a band and record some songs and write and record some songs. So we started working on some songs together. I think at that point we invited in Pat, who was living in LA with Sanford, and I was living in West Virginia at the time, but I started commuting to Los Angeles to work on this Prometheus project. And I also roped in my friend Nigel Gavin from the League of Crafty Guitarists, who is not only an amazing bass player, but just one of the most incredible guitarists on earth. And so Nigel, Sanford, and myself sort of formed this core team with Pat to write and record. I think at the time we had about 11 pieces, and we started rehearsing and eventually started recording on 2-inch tape in Sanford's loft in downtown LA. And we were writing as we were recording. So all of these songs were kind of spontaneously pouring out, and the song beds came first, then the lyrics and vocals and melodies came next. And then we invited in our friend Chris Rhine, who's an incredible keyboard player with Santana and a whole set of an amazing resume. And Chris then added this entirely intense second level of like synth and organ parts. And I think the last to join was Stuart Liebig, who is also a well-known Los Angeles bass player who came in after Nigel had done this intense, beautiful, fretless sounding bass parts. Stuart came in and just gave us some more like pop grounding on some of the songs as well. And it took 2 years, but we released this CD in 1994. We made 1,000 copies, and of course struggled like every not just progressive and fairly heavy esoteric band at the time. We struggled to find our audience, and so we released this to very little fanfare. There was initially some interest from Japan. I think Pat and Sanford both had enough presence and visibility from their previous careers that there was interest, but not enough to give us enough income or even backing to look at getting together to tour or take a next step. Right. But for me, the process of writing, recording, and essentially indulging in this metal, heavy driven, complex music, especially after 7 years of acoustic guitars with the League, was a left turn, and it's still some of my favorite memories from recording sessions and some of my favorite music on the planet.
Right. You know, I got that CD, and I believe on the same, I want to say it's the same label. There was another band that had I'll say a Crimson Element. I think they were called 10 Seconds.
Yes. Bill Forth,
And
our friend Bill, is also on this CD. Yeah. Bill
and
self-released his 10 Seconds album, but it also had Robert Fripp and Bill Rieflin playing on it as well. And it was very similar feel, a little dark, a little apocalyptic, and pretty heavy.
um yeah, but I also noticed with 10 Seconds there were like shorter pieces, I think,
Yeah.
and it was a little more punchier.
Yep.
You know, got someone asking a question. A guy named Bill Campbell. Was there a greater pressure for you to be a lyricist and a singer?
Oh, hi, Bill. Bill's an old friend and a huge Prometheus fan as well. Um, there was some pressure, although we began with these dual guitar kind of parts. Some fairly crafty kind of interlocking guitar writing that was going on at the time, and that was very alive for many of us from the League. But I kind of morphed into lyricist and singer after most of the beds of the songs were done. It reminds me of how I've heard Peter Gabriel describing The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, where I think Tony and Mike and Phil and Steve had built these intricate orchestral sort of a maze, and then Peter would go off in the next room and work to find the lyrics and the I think even I heard Sting in an interview with Stuart Copeland recently talking about how if the music is vital and alive, the lyrics sort of emerge, the melodies sort of emerge from the music as if the music contains it all already, and then
Right.
the words and the shapes sort of pour out. So Bill, it was a little bit like a two-step process, getting the music done first, and then the songs kind of emerged out of that, and I still work that way today.
Yeah, I think when you listen, a lot of music that I've listened to, you can hear, even in the instrumentals, you can hear the story going on, and then and there's sometimes where you kind of hope that the band put some lyrics there, but then at the same time, it's like I think they were leaving it up to the audience to put their own thing
Yeah.
there. You know, what are they talking about? You know, especially you get a good set of musicians that can actually not only playing their instruments, but their instruments are singing a song at the same time. If that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Bill knows this, but in my long catalog, I often have two versions of the same piece, the instrumental version and the version where the song kind of came to life. And both feel like they have their own validity and their own role and their own function. And they're really sometimes very different in terms of the emotional energy or the instincts that bubble up through an instrumental can sometimes be radically different than a vocal version of the exact same piece.
Right. Um, Now, since he's a big fan of
Hmm.
Prometheus project, and I've asked you this, and I think you said that it's really kind of relying on one person whether or not there's more music from you guys from
Hmm.
that project.
Well, I have lost touch with my collaborator Sanford Ponder over the last few years. In fact, over the last few days, I've been asking my network of friends who are all connected to Sanford, where is he? I think Sanford kind of went off grid maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So I am reaching out to see where Sanford is because I hope to re release this project on January 1st as kind of a 28th anniversary of completion. And at one point, probably 12 years ago, Sanford was going full Marie Kondo and decluttering his life. And I think he moved from Los Angeles. Actually, it was the time I think he was actually down in the Bay Area. But he bought a retreat center out in the middle of nowhere in the desert outside of Los Angeles and opened up kind of a healing center. And I think as part of that, he purged a lot of his old life. That includes music, gear, and but I've lost touch with him, and I hope to regain contact. So maybe we can make this a joint release in January. And in preparation for that, I took the old songs and I built a little website where you can go audition and listen to the original songs. It's at steveball.com/Prometheus if you want to go get a sense of where I'm going with the idea of a next release. And I probably have 3 unreleased tracks as well that we didn't quite complete. And of course, my bass player friend Nigel Gavin, who I'm still collaborating with to this day. Nigel sent me a while ago some of our rehearsal tapes, which are fascinating to hear these funny guitar parts being locked together and a bass line and like figuring out the drums and the time. Some of the rehearsal tapes might make it as bonus tracks on whatever we do for January of 2022.
Yeah, because I really think, like you said, since you only released a certain amount of the CD that didn't really get out there, and I think it's, to me, and I'm sure your friend Bill, it's a very important album,
Hmm.
especially for those of us that owned it.
Hmm.
And I'm sure with you, it's very special too. Because obviously you created it, and I really think that people need to know that there was this band out there called Prometheus that had everything that you really wanted in music. I mean, you had the great vocals, you had the great music, and you had and it fit in at that time, in the
Hmm.
90s where everything was getting to the more aggressive side,
Mm-hmm.
King Crimson came back.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of going to a more taking what they did in the Wetton era and
Yeah.
then modernized it, combined it with the discipline area, you
Yeah.
know, and made something completely different. And then Prometheus comes out, and it was almost like I want to say, and I could be wrong. Prometheus and King Crimson feel like they're cousins.
Oh, for sure. There's no question that you can't go from 7 years of playing guitar in the League of Crafty Guitarists without, and my own connection to and love of Robert's writing and all of the aesthetics and ethics that sort of come out of that way of working were definitely transmitted into the collaboration here. And I think if people look back and want to, Nigel just mentioned in a text message a couple minutes ago, in a way, both the themes and the music and the even the front cover of like these puppets ripping apart a globe. There's a whole set of the what's captured here that's still relevant today, if not more relevant. And so everything from the songs, Assault on the Consensus, to some of the themes we were dealing with complexity going on the high level, and then this like intensity going on underneath, and a little tiny voice crying for help on top. Some of the thematic things we were going after are maybe even more relevant today. So, and I
Well,
want to mention one thing. My collaborator, Sanford Ponder, he's also a deeply unappreciated guitarist and musician and writer. And the idea that he disappeared or fell off the face of the earth after, kind of 3 phases of his own music career, being a private music label artist at the time was incredible. And he owned one of the first Fairlight synthesizers in New York City. In the very, very early days when I think Peter Gabriel, Laurie Anderson, and there were probably 4 Fairlights in the world, and he had one of them. So Sanford was always on the bleeding edge. The most incredible guitar solos and guitar parts from Prometheus come from Sanford's fingers and body, and he really gave his life to music. And 1994, when we released this, he also moved to Seattle, and then kind of got diverted into working with technology for 10 years. And he worked at Microsoft and Tell.me, and then he did a startup building domes out of cardboard for homeless people. And then he opened up a retreat center, and I think he progressively withdrew from his work in his life as a musician. But I really want to give a lot of kudos to Sanford for producing this, for having the intensity you're talking about, Ron. That is mostly Sanford's energy, and I'm there to support it and to keep up as best I can. But holy crap, Sanford was a force of nature and probably still is wherever he is today.
right, yeah. Well, I hope you do get reconnected with him, because with that self-titled album, it was almost like I felt as an audience member, the same way someone would with a movie. You got a good movie going on, and then it's like it's not like it was left you open for, oh yeah, it's definitely have to have a sequel or a continuation. But with Prometheus, it felt like for me like that, like it's like you got this thing going, this the theme of both the lyrics and then the music, and it was like I was hoping for more, and then nothing happened, and I was like going, okay, well, at least they put this one out, and that all the people that bought it originally have that for memories of that point in time, 1994.
Yeah.
When when in your area, in the Seattle, Washington area, the big music scene at that time was grunge, and it's like here you had all that anger in their music, but it was like it was unfocused, whereas Prometheus was more focused, and you felt a little, even though it was different sounding than anything out there at that time, you felt comfortable with the music. It's like, okay, this music is going to take me somewhere, but I feel comfortable going on that ride.
Hmm.
There's some that you don't feel comfortable with, because you have no idea where they're going.
Yeah.
Um, and because I guess because of their execution of their music,
Yeah.
you don't feel comfortable with, but with yourself and Robert Fripp, you feel comfortable. Even though you guys could take us on, you know, that what was that ride over in Disneyland, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. You could take us on this wild ride. We don't know where we're going, but
Yeah.
we feel comfortable that you're in the driver's seat. You're going to take it somewhere. It's going to be amazing, scary, fantastic, but you're never going to take us to a place we don't want to go.
Well, that's both humbling to hear, Ron, and I know from my friends Bill, Brett, Nigel, that's why we do this. Our mission and our work is largely designed going back to the day that my friend Brett Hamilton introduced the music of Robert Fripp to me. Probably 19. Do you remember Brett? 78. Or 1976, my friend John Hogland handing me Relayer. This gift of giving each other access to music that opens the way we see and think and hear and experience keeps on giving. And I do know over the years that I've met so many people who have stumbled onto this little piece of history, and some people hate it, but there's a whole set of people who have a deep connection to whatever was brewing from that collaboration, and I'm grateful to those people for continuing to search for the experience of that feeling, and I hope that we can bring some of it back to life with a re-release in 2022.
Yeah, it was for me. It's one of the very few albums of that time that I remember. You know, I think it came out and I bought it just the right time.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
just, how did they say, the stars were aligned? It's like this band I never heard of before put out the CD. I bought it, and I bought it blindly.
Hmm.
I had no idea what I was getting into.
So sorry.
It's just that it was. I don't even remember how I found out about it. I
Hmm.
just I just was at that time. I think I was on a starting off my musical journey of getting different kinds of music in the early '90s,
Yeah.
and um,
It might
like
have been. I did an interview with John Collins, who had a magazine called
okay,
Progression
yes,
at the time, and John was also a fan. And I forget where we connected, maybe on some league tour somewhere. And I was a fan of his work because he was also at the time storytelling, and he did a zine essentially to try and help promote the music of artists who were doing this semi non-commercial but really interesting progressive music.
oh yeah,
Oh, Bill
that
heard it.
was.
Yeah, Bill said the same thing.
I
Progression.
think I think that's probably where uh, I got it, found out about it too, because
Hmm.
I briefly at that time subscribed to it. Um, Back then, it was really hard to subscribe to some of these types of magazines because um, trying to get your money to them, and this is back when you had to send a check or a money order to these guys,
Yeah.
and how it seemed to uh, yeah, absolutely no internet. So it's like people today are so lucky that you can find out anything
Yeah.
about bands that are up and coming.
Yeah.
And but yeah, at that time I was discovering 1990 was, when I said I got into Red, and then 93 in Los Angeles they had a thing called Prog Fest
Oh
over
yeah.
at over at UCLA at
Yeah.
Royce Hall, and I've been to all of the ones that came out in um, the Los Angeles area. I think there was
Yeah.
one that came out in San Francisco. I never went to that one
Yeah.
because I never even knew it existed until years after.
Yeah.
But I went to every single one, and it was like each festival, each year, 93, 94, 95.
Yeah.
And then they skipped a year. They went to 97 and then 2000. Each one of those, especially the ones in the 90s,
Yep.
every band that came onto the stage afterwards, everybody in the audience flocked to the merch tables, and they were
Yeah.
buying. It's like if the band had 3 CDs out, everybody was buying, and it was just amazing how things got sold out so quickly.
Yeah.
And that's where I bought it
Ah, okay. Small world.
at Progfest '94.
Well, that's exactly the way word of mouth used to work before the internet. But the good news is, with events like you're hosting today, Ron, it's really easy for me to say things like, oh my God, go check out Nigel Gavin's Gitbox Rebellion, or all of Nigel's work, or our Tiny Orchestral Moments spin-off that is Nigel and Paul Richards and a bunch of crafty guitarists with a whole set of international collaborators. And so word of mouth still works, but it's so much more efficient, so that Justin in England and Nigel in Auckland and let's say Brett in where? Colorado somewhere, and Bill on the East Coast. Look at us connecting now over a passion and a love for this ongoing pursuit of these amazing moments where music comes in, goes in, and wakes you up to a new way of listening.
Exactly. I have never gotten into really seriously playing a musical instrument. Uh, Back in third grade, I had this amazing teacher that this guy had a red afro, the red beard, and looked like a total hippie. And he would always end one of his class, pull out his acoustic guitar, and he would play a couple of folk songs. And that was amazing. And then he would say, I do over the summer, guitar. And I was like, oh, okay. And I told my mom, I said, this is amazing. I want to try this. See if I like it. Well, we didn't have a guitar. So, and at the time we couldn't afford something like that. But then she noticed her friend had a guitar because she used to, in the church choir, she was the guitarist. And, oh, you could borrow a guitar. It was a 12-string. Well, learning 12 folk songs on a 12-string. I think
that's pretty hard work.
I think that's what if I had learned it on a regular 6-string, I probably would have continued. But I think because really diving into the deep end, I was drowning with this, and I couldn't figure out where to put my fingers and everything. So since then, up until basically the mid '80s, I think I started my career as a professional listener. And I just had to, like everything, I absorbed the music into it, whether it was extremely heavy or a soft acoustic music. Everything I had to absorb it, and at the time when I was listening to the thrash metal stuff, I look back now and it's like I missed out on so much stuff that was coming out at that time that I think I should have, because my mindset was, oh, that's too soft, and now I look back and I can appreciate stuff like, you're putting up ecstasy. I can
Mm.
appreciate that now.
Mm.
Back then,
Not so much.
not so much. I
Yeah.
would say, oh, hey, it's not
Yeah.
heavy enough, you
Yeah.
know.
Give me more energy. Yeah. Give me more aggression.
So it's like I'm looking back at things that either I never heard of or I heard of but
Mm.
never got into. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been just getting into so much, and that's the amazing thing with the internet, that it
Mm.
helps me get there quicker.
Yeah.
And then of course, word of mouth,
Yeah.
you know, friends that I respect their music taste, that
Mm-hmm.
they're not gonna recommend me something that they know that I'm not gonna like.
Yeah. For sure. I have one more quick
One,
story about the word of mouth thing, and I'll see if Brett. I think Brett might be here. Brett Hamilton and I, we were played in a band together in high school and when we were in college afterwards, and we went to see Peter Gabriel in 1980. It was the Melt tour. Peter, Tony Levin, David Rhodes, all bald. Jerry Marotta, all bald, and we went to the show downtown Chicago, and the opening band was Random Hold, which was where David Rhodes sort of made his transition into Peter Gabriel's band. But after the show, we somehow found out that where Random Hold's hotel was, and we drove over and sort of stalked David Ferguson, who was Random Hold's keyboard player, and we met him in a hallway of this weird hotel, this round-shaped hotel on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. And the one moment I took away or really remembered from that, and Brett, I don't know if you remember this, we asked him, what music do you listen to? And Random Hold was incredible. I don't know if you know their stuff yet, Ron, but really great band. And David Ferguson said, oh, my favorite band is The Residents. And I don't know, Brett, you might have heard of them before this, but that was my intro from an influential musician, trickling down this little fact, this little detail about this San Francisco band called The Residents, who makes some of the most insane and intense theatrical music on earth, and completely non-commercial. Like there's just no hope of any commercial breakthrough whatsoever for The Residents by design.
right.
And but that was another word of mouth moment that to this day, the residents and who the residents are and how they think and what they do, I would say even influenced some of the crazy decisions like, should we take it safe or should I do this high falsetto thing and shout out, Mommy, and someplace in the song.
Right.
And a little bit like oblique strategies. Sometimes I ask, what would the residents do here if you feel stuck?
Oh yeah, that's what I was really lucky in the early 90s to have friends that had a band. There was more originally they were kind of like a heavy progressive band because they originally came from the East Coast,
Mm,
and the guitar player would do if they did some ELP songs,
wow.
he would do Keith's parts on the guitar.
What? Okay, that's a little crazy.
Yeah, he would do that, and of course, he came out. He had the double neck guitar, so he was able to do
Uh,
different things.
yeah,
And his bass player had a double neck bass, which that was crazy when I saw that. I was like, going, okay, and that was before I saw Geddy Lee have the double bass, you
yeah,
know. But and then they got together when they came out to the West Coast, um, with my friend who was more into heavy metal. So
mm,
they went from a little more intricate kind of a sound to a more straightforward sound,
yeah,
and they were trying to copy the sound that was going on in the early '90s uh, as it got into the grunge.
Yeah.
They were trying to copy that instead of what they should have done is done what they did all along.
Mm.
Just continue. But I got to sit in on some of their sessions,
Hmm.
and it was just amazing to see how they put together songs.
Yeah, I think
You
there's
know,
a. This is Sophie, by the way. Speaking of putting together songs,
Hi, sorry.
Sophie's learning about songwriting, and she's even taking some songwriting lessons with one of her piano teachers, and now collaborating with a friend of hers in New Zealand near Nigel. But we're almost done. Okay, see ya. That's Sophie, 13.
yeah, like Bill was talking about Getty's double neck. My friend's double neck, I think I want to say was, I don't even remember what the brand was, but it wasn't a Rickenbacker. It,
Hmm.
um, and then one time he came, he was gone for most of a weekend, and they came back on a Monday, and he came back with this green, very sleek looking bass that when you turn off the lights, you press a button, and the whole fretboard lit up.
Oh,
He had
yes.
one of those, and I was like, going, and how much? I said, how much did you spend? Oh, $3,000. I go, did you have the money? No, but I wanted it. I
Okay.
pawned off I pawned off a bunch of stuff. I wanted it.
Yes, that's a problem. There can be gear, lust, and guitar problems when there's something you just feel like you really need.
And and the only thing with this guy was, I mean, he was very passionate, but he could not keep time.
Wow.
He was going off, and it was like if the guitarist went into a solo, they didn't have the thing planned for him to do it. He copied right in, and it just sounded awful.
Oof.
And we
So
had
sorry.
one day that they were playing, and they couldn't find him, and they were going to go on at this one club in North Hollywood. I forget what it was called, but and here they were a three-piece. So here they are. The drummer was there, the guitarist was there, and the sound guy was like going, "So where's the other guy? We don't know." And the drummer saved the day. He says, "Okay," because the drummer was taking some sound engineering.
Hmm.
Okay, we're gonna go on anyways. So he told the sound guy. He says, "Turn up the bass on my drum," and then he said, "And put every effect that you have on your console
Hmm.
on the guy's vocals."
Hmm.
And they did, and to this day, the guitarist wished that he recorded. They did that Genesis song "Tonight."
Oh yeah.
They did that, but a little more metallic version of it. But
Hmm.
because the way they were going at it as a two-piece, and it's like, and I told him, I said, something, just dump that bass player. You got the sound right there. Maybe add a keyboard player to get some sounds in there. And it's like they never wanted to do that because that was going way off the reservation, so to speak.
Yeah, there is one other insight or maybe obvious observation about that story, Ron, too, which is bands are fragile. I mean, how music is made, how individuals come together, and even just adding one person or a different instrument or a different point of view can change, and I will even just say F up chemistry and momentum super quickly. And so, one of the things that most of my collaborators know that I try to be really careful about the chemistry. It's almost like organizing a dinner party. I have to be really careful about, well, don't sit the vegan right next to the dude with the hamburger. And
Right.
you have to be careful about these genre driven polarizations because bands break up usually as soon as you schedule the photo shoot, that's the day the band breaks up, because then everyone stops focusing on the music and they're like, yeah, but I want to look strong, and my hair's not sexy enough, or my zipper needs to be open.
Right.
And as soon as you like lose focus of the music, for me, I lose interest.
Oh yeah.
So it's super, bands are very fragile.
Well, that's where, when the music video age came out, I think that's when it started for me, where it's like all of a sudden music before that, you had an image, but it wasn't like super, super important. But then once the video age came out, now we have to look a certain way. And, bands that never looked like that before,
Hmm.
they start getting themselves, you got the long hair of the 70s, and all of a sudden here comes the 80s where they have that new wave hairstyle. It's like their publicist said, or whoever it is, say, hey, you need to cut your hair to look this way.
Yeah.
and and then it just, me, like you said, it just lose all focus on the music.
Yeah.
um
That's why I love it if you just wear a giant eyeball on your head. You don't have to worry about your hairstyle.
exactly.
And if you look back at the history of, like, one of my favorite bands, this might sound like heresy as well, but Heart is very, like, it's like the Led Zeppelin with intense female vocals. So, and Ann and Nancy, of course, used to be in Seattle, and there was a whole scene in the mid 90s. But look across the history of Heart, Barracuda, and some of the harder stuff they're doing. And then there's this era where their hair just sort of goes like heavy metal and giant. And then the mid 90s, it sort of shifts and everything's soft and combed. And it's amazing to watch between the outfits and the hairstyles, and contrast that with some next punk or grunge or fusion or minimalism or retro grunge v3.1.
Right.
How much the fashion kind of follows where the music is going.
Exactly. And it's like, to me, it's like I had never been one for fashion. I just been I always say, I was built for comfort, not speed. you know and I I just, you know when everybody had long hair, I had short hair, and then when they had short hair, for some reason my hair got a little longer, and it's like, so I never really fit in, and then when uh you know new wave happened, everyone was wearing these kind of futuristic looking clothing. I never wore that.
Yeah.
Grunge era, I never wore that style, but that was more into where I was previously, where I was just wearing t-shirt and jeans. I was just really, really laid back on that. I didn't, almost um, um, being blended into the background.
Yeah.
I had no uh, need for having, back in the 80s, big hair.
Has it
Uh,
gotten worse with COVID, Ron? Because those of you who look at my regular online appearances generally see the same fashion every day, all the time. I've
yeah,
got my COVID uniform.
I usually wear this only because it's cold out, or I wear a regular ball cap, and on my ball cap I have, uh, on one side, a King Crimson little pin that I got back in 94, 95, and then on the other side I have a Doctor Who pin. It's like,
Nice.
I mean, I just got just two of the things that are very important to me, and it's like, but I wear hats.
Yeah.
When I have short hair, I wear hats. A few
Hmm.
years ago, I had hair down to my shoulders, so
Hmm.
I didn't wear hats. So
Yeah.
it's like, um, but to me, I don't think fashion and and different styles, whether hair is is important when for music. I think music is important. I don't care what the musician looks like.
Yeah.
I really don't. That's not important to me. What's important to me is can they play?
Yeah. I
And
think that's why you'll see over the years, Ron, I don't go for the put your face on the album cover approach. In fact, rarely. The only faces I have really ever put on CD covers are the faces of my daughter, and I don't, or maybe a stone statue from Mexico City.
right.
But maybe with a couple of exceptions, one iconic photograph that isn't really about the faces. It's more about the posture of these people collaborating, in this case in 1999 in Seattle, with Dean Jensen, Bill Rieflin, Kurt Golden, Jaxie Binder, Robert Williams, and some crazy dude with some hair at the time. I find that the image and images that are actually used to represent the music for me are also really important. And this might come back, Bill, to yes, it might come back to the idea that for me there's a strong visceral connection between an image and the sound of the particular song or piece that feels like they are essentially wrapped up together in a essential relationship if the artist makes that connection.
Right. Yeah, it's really important for me. It's really important that when the musician makes their music, concentrates on making their music instead of like, you know, what am I going to wear today? How am I going to, comb my hair? Am I going to wear my glasses or my sunglasses? It's like, how about you take all that energy that you're doing for that and then put it into your music?
Yeah,
Because
that's a beautiful idea. There's a lot of there's a few comments running by, but I'm on a little deadline. I have a meeting coming up with my Troot collaborator, with Tim Root, in about half an hour, and I need to go give Sophie and Regina a little bit of family time.
Okay.
But I want to ask Ron or anyone else who happens to be here now, any last quick burning questions? Could be Prometheus, could be anything, could be something about our previous interactions, but Ron, specifically for you, any last burning question?
Well, I think you answered it when you told me January 2022.
Yeah.
And I think I told you at the same time off air, that there was another musician that I got into, Robert Berry, and
Yes.
he has an album that has been out of print, and it's fetching crazy amounts of money on eBay and stuff like that. And he's looking for a 2022 or possibly a 2023 reissue of it. So it's like
Nice.
I think, and it was a '90s album, so probably
Nice.
about around the same time. So.
Well, there's a lot of archival work going on now. I think people with COVID on their hands too, there's been a set of investments that people have made to try and look back and a little bit like we were talking about, sort of clearing the space and making room and kind of having moments where you want to just let go of something or complete something. So there's a lot of that going on right now. In fact, the theme of this year for me is completion. As Brett knows, I've got and Nigel, there's a huge backlog of this Tiny Orchestral Moments work from the last 4 years that will see the light of day later this year as a documentary, 12-part, 30 to 50 minute documentary series. Each episode is about 30 to 50 minutes. And then there's about currently 120 songs from this Tiny Orchestral Moments work that we're going to trickle out, probably a song a week for 2 years, is the current idea. So there's a whole backlog of cleanup that's going on, Ron, and part of my cleanup for this year has been getting Seattle Guitar Circle re-released on an anniversary as well, particularly as one of the members died last March 24th. So there's some cleanup going on, and part of that involves taking projects like Prometheus and bringing them back to life.
Well, I appreciate it, and obviously Bill will appreciate it too, and then everyone else that had bought it originally or didn't get it originally, and maybe heard some of the stuff, that they can
Yep.
get it and they can be able to hear it proper. I would say hear it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. That helps. Yes. R.I.P. Bill Rieflin. So let's do this. Ron and team, Dave. Uh, I'll make a quick transition now, but I want to express intense gratitude, Ron, for
Oh, you're welcome.
the leaps you make to bring musicians to your life and also then continue the network, growing the network. Because I know you do this as a form of love and payback, and I'm grateful for that. And to everybody who stumbles onto this little esoteric chat, I also want to say thank you for bravely looking beyond whatever random revel and stuff you might be hearing in the pop music channels or in the most popular forms and formats. I'm not saying that isn't great, but I really appreciate those of you who are adventurous enough to look for some of the weirder music that may not be getting all of the mainstream attention.
Exactly. And now, honestly, with what's going on in the world, this is the best time to go exploring.
Yep.
You got time on you. Some people have more time on their hands, so
Yeah.
time to do some exploring.
Yep.
You
Well,
know,
thank you, Ron, for being an intense and amazing explorer.
oh, you're welcome, and thank you for making music for me to explore.
Awesome. Let's leave it at this. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Yes,
And for
yes,
those who
thank you.
tune in later, feel free to reach out, and I hope you'll continue to support Ron's ongoing series of interviews like this. To
And this will be on YouTube on my channel.
great.
I'll put a link.
Okay,
If
and
you if you look up Prognaut on YouTube, you'll find there's a bunch of stuff on there, and this will be up probably within a couple hours.
awesome. All right, Ron, great work, and I'll spread the news as well. Stay in touch in the
Hey,
meantime too, and I'll keep you posted of new and interesting things that happen in case you really must hear something that I stumble on. I'd love the same recommendations and things that wake you up. Send them my way.
okay, all right. Thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate taking the time out to
All right,
chat.
no worries. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you all
Thank
soon.
you. Okay,
All right, bye.
bye.